Good afternoon. My name is Matt Spears. I'm a technology integrator at Chesterfield County, and we're going to talk about engaging students in collaboration and talk about some of the ways to make that successful. So I'm going to start sharing my screen and we'll get going. If you have any questions, you can find me. Chesterfield employees, feel free to email me. I'm Matthew_Spears. Got a nice picture of me in sunglasses, should pop up. And the same on Twitter. So I'm Matthew L. Spears on the Twitter machine. So look forward to seeing you there. So let's start by getting a little screen share action going on. And here we go. So we're going to talk about engineering successful student collaboration. More specifically, we're going to talk about some of the ways to build um, in the how. So how do you set up a student activity so that folks are collaborative in groups that are paired up in bigger groups, groups that have to speak without seeing face to face. So kids that are on an odd even schedule having to collaborate, or maybe even across physical barriers in different schools. So there's a lot of elements of collaboration here, and we're going to try and talk about a bunch of them. So the first is we're going to talk about some of the fundamentals of collaboration, and I think that we might bypass some of the fundamentals of what collaboration means and how it translates into digital technologies, uh, and an understanding that kids might quote unquote know technology and therefore can 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 create and collaborate easily on it. I think is a fallacy. I think we had to figure out the right way to coach kids in their collaboration. So we're going to talk about some specific actions and highlight some examples as well. So this is me and my face. That's not really me, but that's my face whenever group work was assigned to me in high school and in college, because you always kind of go, man, I know I pull my weight. And I'm definitely the best team player, but nobody else on the team pulls their weight. And that's wrong. That's obviously not true. So once you beat that out of your brain, you recognize that maybe the skills of an individual that I know to be true as I write my own paper, or moving up through grades, that I was always asked to do my own work and turn my own work in. And the skills that made me successful as an individual don't necessarily translate into group work. There's some things at play there where I might be really good at specific tasks as an individual, but that doesn't translate into group work. I need to figure out how to help others be good at that task also. There's also some tasks that are just flat out not there as an individual. I have no real responsibility to collaborate or communicate with my peers as an individual. In group work, I absolutely have to be on the same page as my peers. And that's a skill set that I don't get to practice enough as an individual, exchanging information back and forth between my teacher. So I think we have to make sure we're understanding that hey, this might be a completely new skill set that we're asking our kids to understand, and really build in some support for them doing it. So here's a handful of things that we can talk about. We're going to talk about creating interdependence on the team, what teamwork skills might be needed to successfully collaborate, and then the accountability at the end, all pointing toward making a great team, making a great collaborative experience for your students. So let's dive right in. And I'm going to pop out of this presentation back and forth. The first is you want that group of kids, those students, to form a solid interdependence. They need to be able to trust and rely on each other, and creating shared goals will help that interdependence. If I know I have to rely on one of my teammates to accomplish something before I can do it, maybe I can't get my work done until they get their work done. So maybe it's going to behoove me to help them along. How can I be of service to you? Um, but that all starts in a task that is significant. So if you're doing group work just to do group work, examine what you're asking your kids to do. If they could do it all by themselves, maybe group work isn't the right solution. You want to have a tough enough task that it is a requisite that kids get together, they start to create shared goals, and they get to buy into what they're actually trying to accomplish. So next, You want to make kids aware that they need to divide up this task in terms of roles and responsibilities. So maybe this is a situation where kids need to figure out who's going to be the leader, who's going to be an organizer, who's going to be gathering materials, who's going to do research. Maybe there's a storyboard involved, maybe there's some technical expertise, but how do you help kids understand what some of those roles might be? So what I've got here is a document that lists a handful of things that could be described as a role title or a job responsibility on a team. So this would be a place as a teacher that I would direct my students toward and say, you've established your group goals. What I want you to do here, you've got let's say four people on your team that are going to be collaborating. Pick the four role titles that are job essential and spend some time figuring out what those descriptions are and come over here and put your name next to it if you're interested. So what I've got kids doing now is evaluating their project, the goals of their project, and then comparing and contrasting what some of the job responsibilities or roles that they can play on that team. And then collaboratively saying, hey, I'm interested in being this particular job. And maybe more than one kid is interested in being on that job. And you know what? Could be a good opportunity for them to figure out how to work together as a completer or as an editor. It also might be a necessity of that particular task. So if there happens to be a significant number of or specialized skills for IT specialists, maybe you want a variety of knowledge bases there working on different problems related to that particular role. So this is a great place for one, students to come to organize around what they're supposed to do in terms of a role. And then two, you as a teacher have an accountability measure. You have the ability to come back and say, hey, aren't you supposed to be editing? Part of that description says that you should be doing this. And you've got a great opportunity to help a kid be a better editor or a better organizer or whatever they happen to be interested in. So next, we're going to talk about using only the best resources. So you don't want kids creating group work around junk. So one of the great parts of being in Chesterfield County is we have access to some seriously cool tools. We've got in our my.ccps dashboard for teachers and students access to Gale research databases, and there is a wealth of knowledge there. So we need to help our kids get to the best resources and utilize the best resources so that they have accurate, vetted information. And some of the great stuff about Gale is it integrates into the tools that teachers use already. So signing in with Google is a great way to get your information from a Gale database directly to the kids that need it in Google Classroom. So you can take this specialized thing and help them find good stuff depending on their age range. So and deliver it specifically to individual kids or specific groups of kids. So moving on, we're going to talk about team skills. So you don't just put kids together and assume that they're going to work together. It takes a lot of work. It takes kids getting to know each other. It takes them figuring out what a good team is, what a good team might not be. So let's start there. First task you want to ask your kids to do is sit down and what are the elements of strong teams? What do strong teams actually do? Do they have the ability to put their finger on an actionable thing that they think strong teams do? Maybe they're a part of a sports team and they can translate something from the sports arena into the academic arena. Or maybe they've been a part of other teams where they've needed to do specific tasks related to producing a project, and they want to bring a past experience in the academic or classroom setting up in this particular setting. So you also want to focus on the exact opposite. So yeah, I was on a team and it fell apart, and it fell apart because. So exactly the same thing you did in the first one, but identify those poor teams that didn't do so hot, and do a little research and aggregation around what made unsuccessful teams. So that there's a list somewhere kids can come back and say, hey, good teams equal this and bad teams equal that. It's going to be important as we kind of cruise through some of these teamwork skills. Next thing, we're going to start to get your teams and your groups to identify very, very difficult stuff. So again, I'm going to remind you that you're picking group work based on a very difficult task. It's a necessity that kids work together to accomplish this particular thing. So you want to get them to really hone in on what are these individual tasks, and then you want to take those tasks and you want to force them to break them down into smaller steps. So let's talk about how we could use some technology here to help out that particular process. So this is an example of an action plan, where at the very top of this action plan, we've got some placeholder text. So excuse what it looks like. Yeah. But your groups would have the ability and kind of have the instruction to put their big project goal there. What's the big thing they're trying to accomplish? And what we want to do there is provide a broad enough statement. We're going to make our community dialed into efforts on clean water. We're going to expose folks to how to be more aware of communicable diseases, big, broad topics. And then underneath that, you've got a handful of ways to break down that project goal into specific objectives and or tasks. And so right up top, you've got this nice collaborative document that you can bring this one team to, where they can have one source of identifying exactly what their project is and their objectives. And then down below, you've actually got a way to break those down into even greater detail, where if I'm going to attack this particular objective, here's the things that I'm going to need to do as a teammate or as an individual to accomplish that individual objective. The other thing that this serves is providing an element of transparency to every member of the team, as well as the teacher. So if you've got the ability to say, hey, I know you're responsible for objective 2. I see that you have actions 1, 2, and 3 stuck in there. How you doing on those? Like, where are you getting stuck? Or are you already done? Really great opportunity for you, the teacher, or a group of kids to all be on the same page to kind of project manage. Next couple of steps is you want to make sure kids are reflecting upon how they're performing as a team. We're talking about collaboration here, and what we want is solid collaboration. So I want to be able to say, hey, we talked about these high quality things as a strong team, and we talked about things as the pitfalls of a weak team. How am I doing on accomplishing these strengths and weaknesses myself? What's my own self-perception? And so real easy to kind of grab a example of a Google form that you can actually use here. What's your name? To try and grab who's doing what, an example of what role are you serving. And then we used a little bit of conditional formatting here to say, if you answered leader, go to the specific section on leader, or if you're the specialist of something, head to this particular section, so that you only get that particular answer. And then how are you doing as a leader? And then give us an example of why you rated yourself a 1, or why did you rate yourself as a 5? So this is an example of a form that can be used as a self-reflection example for some of the kids on teams. And the reason why that's so important is because it provides the ability of a kid to self-reflect, identify a strength or a weakness, and pivot in the moment. If you do this at the end and only the end of a project, kids have no ability to get better in process. It's too late for them to identify a weakness and make that weakness a strength. What you're after here is students growing as collaborators throughout that process. And by using a form, you've got the ability to paint that picture of that individual student growing on this particular scale of 1 to 5 over the course of the project. Last thing you want to make sure kids are aware and you're doing with them is conclude the project with a peer evaluation that correlates to the self-reflection. So you want to ask the questions now, instead of asking only to the individual to self-reflect, you're going to take those same questions and pivot it toward the group members on that team. So if you ask questions about how successful the leader was, you want on it as a self-reflection, you want the people on that team to evaluate that person too, because you as the teacher need to help kids be accountable for, hey, you perceived yourself this way, and so did the team. That's outstanding. Or in a very strange situation, and hopefully this isn't something that you come across, is, you self-reflected real low, and you didn't seem to really feel like you made a whole lot of growth through this project. But that's not what your team sees. The folks on your team see you as a real strong organizer, a real strong editor. So I think you need to do a little bit of self correction there on how you evaluate yourself. So again, this isn't necessarily an evaluation process of what the actual product is that the group created, but more an evaluation on how they're functioning as a team and how they're collaborating as a team. So those are the three steps that we identified to help make better collaborators. Now let's talk about some of the educational tools that we've got to help kids in different scenarios. So earlier I referenced different types of collaborative settings. So this is a collaborative setting. We're going to call it peer writing, where somebody's drafted a document and it's being handed off for peer review. So in this particular case, what I've got is a document that's been drafted and been handed to me for commenting, or maybe it's the second time somebody's handed it off. There's some nice tools here where I can take text and highlight it and then come off to the side and add comments. And what you can see is you've got peer editors helping and providing links to resources on how do you actually build in hyperlinks. So in this case, maybe you want to link out to something, or maybe you want to figure out how to use a tool baked inside this word processor. Another really nifty tool that I don't feel like is prominent enough is the ability to switch out of editing into suggesting mode. So if I hop into suggesting mode as an editor, as a peer reviewer, I have the ability to say, hey, I don't think your punctuation's so hot right here. You should probably combine these sentences. And it creates a different type of comment off to the side for somebody to take a look at. And the author of this particular document has the ability to say, yeah, you really don't know your grammar. You should probably, I'm not going to take that suggestion. Or, hey, that suggestion was rock solid, and I'm going to accept it. So in this case, I'm going to play the role of the owner and say, that Matthew Spears guy doesn't know his grammar from a hole in the ground, and I'm going to reject that. The check step against that is up in the comment section. All those suggestions, all of the comments for the entire document are housed here. So you as an educator, as a teacher, have the ability to kind of go, hey, you didn't take this suggestion, and it really would have added a whole lot of value to what you're writing or trying to communicate here. So right on a word processor there, great tools here in the suggesting mode, and some comments to provide feedback and collaborate across time barriers, anytime, anywhere. The next example has to do with crossing barriers from an odd schedule to an even schedule. So this is an example of kids that needed to collect data, both qualitative and quantitative, over the course of weeks, and they never met face to face. So what we engineered here was a shared slide deck where the kids on the even day took pictures, uploaded their pictures to the slide on what their particular caterpillar looked like that day, and then wrote a description of it. And then the kid on the odd day did the exact same thing on the exact same collaborative slide deck, and they moved throughout the course of the life of the caterpillar. And then toward the end, they didn't have a whole lot to report because it was just sitting there. And they did some descriptions, but they had an easy way to kind of collaborate back and forth without ever meeting face to face. The last part of this was the collection of data over time, also in a Google form. So this is a chart based off the data that was collected. And what you're seeing here is the length of the caterpillar growing over the course of a couple of days. So you've got some nice tools built in for collaboration here. So it took some work up front on building this and sharing it out to the appropriate kids from the teacher's end. But it was easy for teacher to check in on where kids were throughout the process. And then kids had a real easy way to see where they were supposed to be editing in their color coding. Last example I want to talk about is a tool called WeVideo. And in Chesterfield, we've got a paid version of WeVideo, which allows us to do some really nifty stuff. One of those things is create projects around collaboration. So this is a web-based video platform where students can come and collaborate with each other. So we've talked a lot about assigning different roles. So if a task in a production is significant enough, you might have some folks collecting materials and creating branding materials and grabbing raw footage all over the place. And that's the role of one particular person on that team. But another human wants to be able to look at all of that material in the same project and start to edit all of that footage and all of those icons and all of that branding information into like a video that's less than 120 seconds. And then you've got the last group of, or the last kid in that particular group is responsible for throwing the spaghetti against the wall and making sure what got created by the whole team satisfies the group's goals originally. So let's take a look at how you would do that inside WeVideo. So students have the ability to click on an icon on their Chromebooks for WeVideo, or you can go to wevideo.com and sign in with your Google account. As a teacher, what you would want to do is create a new from your home dashboard, and you're going to actually create a project here. So I'll click project, I'll click next, and now I've got to name this bad boy. So collaboration project is going to be the name of what I'm doing. And then I've got some options here. I'm not operating in silo, and I'm not going to be creating something that's shared like this one. This is the option that I want. I've got different roles all operating on the same project. So I'll click that, I'll click next. And the way I'm going to get this project to my kids is by link. I'm going to have them click on this particular project in Google Classroom, and I'm going to take you there in just a second. So I'm going to have this link. I'll say next. It's going to present me with a library. We'll talk about that's for another day. And here's my link. I want to highlight that link that I want my kids to get. I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to say finish. And it's ready for me to start my project. Ready for me to start inviting kids to it. So let's transfer over to my group setting where I send and receive information from my kids, and I direct them specifically to collaborative projects. So here's a post that I've saved. And I have the ability right now to say, hey, I only want these two kids working on this particular project. It's not a whole class project, very small group. I'll name it what it's titled. And then if I need to, I can provide dates and descriptions. But because I'm delivering this project to them via link, I'm going to paste the link into this assignment, and I'm going to assign it to my kids. And now the two students that I assigned this particular project to have the ability to pop in and start to edit their video project. So we talked about a lot of stuff in terms of collaboration. We've broken down some terms in the collaborative world. We've talked about student roles. We've talked about some processes that you as an educator want to put in place, and how to help students be successful as collaborators. So I greatly appreciate you diving in today and paying attention with me. Thanks for participating in Chesterfield's Digital Learning Day. You guys have a good afternoon.